Warning, your decision debt is physically killing your drive. Look, you aren't actually lazy, but you are leaking drive through 1,000 tiny choices you haven't made yet. Most people try to fix this by pushing harder, but the top 1% just remove those hidden decisions so their 8-hour workday feels like 12. Think of decision debt like unpaid bills stacking up interest inside your nervous system, keeping your sympathetic system and HPA axis stuck in the on position until your body quietly kills your motivation. If you take two people with the exact same plan, the first one runs in clean lanes while the second person faces micro-choices every 5 minutes. Even though they have the same amount of time, that second person's brain shows way more alpha suppression on an EEG and only half the mental spark. Over the next hour, we're going to build a cognitive load architecture that gives you back a massive chunk of your drive. If you decide to ignore this, your body will eventually shut off your ambition just to protect itself, which sends your cortisol up and your dopamine straight down. Keep an eye out for the 3 hidden taxes, the 70% rule, and a weird 2-minute reset that totally saves your 3 p.m. energy levels. Here is a quick snapshot of something you can actually feel today. Research from the 2020s shows that making micro-decisions in the morning suppresses your alpha activity and bumps up stress markers like skin conductance. Basically, you're burning about 15 to 25% of your daily drive before you even finish breakfast without even realizing it. That afternoon slump you usually blame on low discipline is actually just your nervous system running a self-defense routine. When all those unmade choices pile up, your brain treats the entire day like a low-grade threat, which keeps your stress response primed and ready. You can get a tiny win right now by using a one-switch rule for your breakfast and your outfit. If you pick one default meal and one style lane for the week, you'll reduce your context switches and stabilize your dopamine levels for an extra hour of focus. We're going to map out decision debt just like money, looking at the principal, the interest, and the compounding, so you can finally see the leaks and stop paying those hidden fees. The biology of decision debt. Think of your brain like a bank account, but instead of cash, you're dealing with choices. The principal is just the total number of decisions sitting on your plate right now. The interest is that heavy mental exhaustion you feel every time you hesitate or jump between tasks. Then you have compounding, which is what happens when you start stressing about choices you haven't even made yet. Your brain keeps reloading those future problems in the background like a browser with too many tabs open. Most people think this is just a productivity problem for their to-do list, but your body is actually the one keeping the books. If your internal ledger looks too risky, your brain will literally ration your motivation to keep you from burning out. This feels physical because it actually is. When you have open loops and messy projects, your nervous system stays on high alert and starts poking at your stress hormones. You don't need to have a full-blown panic attack to feel the damage, because a tiny, constant leak of stress is enough to wear you down. Your amygdala, the part of the brain that scans for danger, stays active when you have fuzzy deadlines or maybe projects hanging over your head. That constant scanning steals the focus you need for deep work and makes it way harder to relax later. Recent brain studies have even shown that when your mental load is too high, your brain struggles to stay in a calm, focused state. You feel that as brain fog, a weird jumpiness, and that annoying itch to keep checking your phone. Then there's dopamine, and this is the part that really clicked for me. We often chase novelty and task switching because they give us these little sugar highs of excitement, but those spikes actually tank your baseline over time. When you bounce between different tools and browser tabs, you get a micro spike followed by a quick crash. If you do this all day, the chemistry in your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that handles goals, actually starts to weaken. It's not that you have a weak character or no discipline. It's that your brain chemistry isn't set up to support a long-term drive. Since dopamine also controls how much you feel like starting a task, you find yourself procrastinating more often because the reward isn't there. You really have to understand the bottleneck here. Your prefrontal cortex is like a very narrow one-lane highway that has to hold what you're doing, what done looks like, and what you need to ignore. Every time you switch contexts, it's like a massive truck trying to merge across that single lane and blocking all the traffic. When your mental load is too high, your brain spends all its energy just trying to manage the rules instead of actually making progress. That's exactly why a clean plan with fewer steps feels so effortless to follow. You didn't suddenly get more willpower, you just cleared the trucks out of the lane so you could finally drive. The silent killer in all of this is the cost of delay. Those choices you haven't made yet don't just sit there quietly. They keep your internal alarm system ringing. Your amygdala isn't trying to ruin your life, it's just being extra cautious about potential mistakes. If you haven't decided when you're going to stop working or what good enough actually looks like, your system flags that as a risk. Your stress chemistry lingers way longer than it should, which means you start your next task with way less mental energy than you realize. People always tell me they'll just finish this one thing and then focus, but because the system never fully resets, they're always running on empty. Here is the secret shortcut that nobody really talks about. Motivation isn't a gas tank you fill up, it's more like a credit line. That credit is backed by how safe and capable your brain feels in the moment. If the underwriter in your head sees total chaos, your credit limit drops and you feel lazy. If it sees clear rules and a single path forward, it raises your limit and gives you energy. This is why removing choices works 1,000 times better than trying to hype yourself up with a motivational video. You're proving to your own biology that it won't get hurt if it releases the energy you need to get to work. I want to show you how this actually looks in the real world. I had a client who used to start every morning by trying to plan their day while checking email, Slack, and their calendar all at once. 15 minutes into the day, their brain was already fried and they felt guilty about it, so they tried to force more discipline. It didn't work at all until we cut the morning routine down to a 3-line plan written the night before and a default breakfast. By making those simple changes, they reported feeling 30 to 50% more focused during their actual work blocks. There's no magic trick here. It's just about giving the brain less threat and more clarity so it can do its job. This is where most people totally mess up because they try to fix a lack of drive by looking for more stimulation. They download new apps, try new hacks, and open even more tabs to find the answer. That novelty gives you a quick hit of dopamine, but then it drags your baseline even lower than where you started. You might feel productive for 20 minutes, but then you feel 10 times worse for the rest of the afternoon. We have to build stability first and save the variety for later. Think of it like managing your blood sugar for your motivation, where big spikes feel exciting, but always leave you feeling hungrier and more tired. One game changer that people ignore is the anticipation loop. Your brain is constantly rehearsing future scenarios to try and reduce risk, which was great in the jungle, but is a total waste of energy at a desk. Unclear projects like, maybe I'll start a newsletter, create these constant mental pings that drain your battery. You can stop about 80% of that drain by either killing the idea entirely or writing down one simple rule. Just tell yourself you'll decide by Friday, and if the answer is no, you'll put it away for 6 months. Once that decision is made, the loop finally closes and your brain can relax. If you don't remember anything else from this, remember that your nervous system loves clear edges. You need to know exactly when you start, what the very first move is, and what done actually looks like in the real world. You also need to know when you're going to stop and who is allowed to interrupt your time. Clean edges get rid of all that fuzzy guesswork and cut down on the safety tax your brain is paying. That opens up more mental space and keeps your dopamine steady while you're trying to get into the zone. This works because of something called cognitive load theory, which says there's a big difference between the actual task and the extra work of setting it up. We are going to focus on destroying that extra work by having fewer gates and a single, obvious next step. That is how you pay off your decision debt and stop the interest from piling up. We'll use a simple momentum strategy so that even if things aren't perfect, your dopamine doesn't come crashing down. I have one quick story about a student who kept stalling on a big report because they thought they just ran out of willpower after lunch. We added a tiny 2-minute reset at 2:58 p.m. where they put cold water on their wrists, took 4 deep breaths, and just wrote the title of the report. That tiny physical shift told their body it was safe to stop being stressed and just start moving. Writing the title led to the first sentence, and 20 minutes later, they were totally in the flow. The only real difference was that their body finally believed it was safe to spend energy again. So, decision debt is a very real biological thing that involves your stress hormones and your brain's focus levels. When you have too many open loops and rapid switches, your dopamine sinks and your brain feels cluttered. But the good news is that when you remove those hidden decisions, your brain pays you back almost instantly. Once we identify the 3 hidden taxes, ambiguity, context, and safety, you'll know exactly what to cut out. Then we can build a system that keeps your drive funded, instead of leaving you mentally overdrawn every single day. The 3 hidden taxes. Let's put a name to these leaks so you can stop them. The ambiguity tax, the context tax, and the safety tax. Each one of these drains your drive in a different way, but they all map back to things your brain needs to feel good, like feeling capable and in control. First up is the ambiguity tax. Most people don't realize how expensive it is to be mostly sure about what they're doing. When the edges of a project are fuzzy, like not knowing exactly what finished looks like, you pay for it with constant mental questions. Your brain keeps asking if you're doing it right or if you're missing something important. That constant mental chatter actually melts your attention span just to keep the mess organized in your head. You don't feel capable when the target keeps moving, and when you don't feel capable, your motivation to keep going just disappears. This is why even the easiest tasks can start to feel like a massive burden. Think about what this looks like in your actual life. You sit down and decide to work on a presentation, but that isn't really a task. It's just a giant pile of undecided choices. You have to figure out which slide to do first, what data to use, and what the main story is. Every single one of those little non-decisions is like a toll booth on the highway to getting things done. Because your brain is terrified of making a mistake, it pauses to preview every option, which spikes your stress and kicks you right out of the flow. You think you're just not motivated, but the truth is you just don't have a clear path to follow. The fix for the ambiguity tax is all about being incredibly specific. You need to define done using your actual senses. By noon, I will have 3 slides drafted with 1 headline and 1 image each. It sounds boring, but that's the point. When the goal is concrete, you feel more competent and your brain stops questioning the rules. Instead of wondering what to do next, you can just focus on moving the cursor and getting the work finished. Next is the context tax, and this one is a total productivity shredder. Every time you switch tools, check a notification, or try to multitask, you're yanking your brain off the main road. We already talked about how rapid switching tanks your dopamine, but it also makes your working memory completely collapse. You lose your train of thought, spend 10 minutes trying to find it again, and then lose it the second another ping goes off. That re-ramping period is where all your productive hours go to die. You'll know you're paying the context tax when your work blocks look like a mess of writing 1 sentence, checking Slack, and then skimming a random document. It feels like you're being busy, but you're really just spinning your wheels. Your head starts to feel loud and thin because your brain is struggling to hold onto too much information at once. You lose your sense of autonomy because it feels like your apps and notifications are the ones in the driver's seat, not you. The shortcut here is to stick to 1 input and 1 output for every work block. If you're writing a report, your only input should be the notes you already have, and your only output should be the document itself. Close every other tab and put your phone in another room. If you realize you need more data, don't go looking for it now. Just make a note and batch that work for later. You aren't being a drill sergeant just for the sake of it. You're protecting your brain's ability to stay focused. You want a single path with no forks in the road while you're actually working. Finally, we have the safety tax. This one is invisible because it lives in your body rather than your thoughts. When you have uncertain rules or soft boundaries, your amygdala marks them as a potential threat that could hurt you later. Your stress levels stay at a constant hum, which slows everything down. You'll notice this when you hesitate to start a project, overedit a simple email, or reread a draft 5 times before hitting send. Your system is scanning for social risks or the chance of looking stupid, so it just stalls out to keep you safe. The safety tax usually shows up around other people and the promises you make to them. You wonder if you should say yes to a request or what will happen if you finally set a boundary. Without clear rules, your body stays on high alert and pays vigilance interest all day long. This is why you can feel totally exhausted after a day of easy meetings and messages. It wasn't the hard work that drained you, it was the constant state of being on guard. Cutting the safety tax means making pre-decisions and setting boundaries you can actually say out loud. You could decide that meetings are a no by default unless there's a clear agenda, or that you always stop working at 5:30 p.m. When you tell yourself, "I am choosing to do this because," it anchors your sense of control and tells your brain it's safe to relax. You're showing your internal system that the lanes are clearly marked, so it can finally release the energy you've been holding back. Every one of these taxes has a specific lever you can pull to fix it. For the ambiguity tax, you define what done looks like to feel more competent. For the context tax, you lock into one lane with one tool to regain your autonomy. For the safety tax, you set clear rules for when you win and when you stop so your brain feels safe. When you hit all three of these, motivation stops being something that happens by luck and starts being a standard policy. The one rule that kills all three taxes at once is using defaults. Defaults get rid of ambiguity because the path is already chosen for you. They crush the context tax because your tools and sequences are fixed ahead of time. And they soothe the safety tax because the rule is already decided. You can have a default breakfast, a default outfit, and a default way to start your morning. It's not about being a robot, it's about removing the gates so that your momentum becomes automatic. When defaults handle the boring stuff, your biology trusts the path and funds your drive. I'll give you one more example. I worked with a designer who always felt super anxious at the start of a project. They had ambiguity because they didn't know what a finished concept looked like, context tax from bouncing between design tools and email, and safety tax from worrying about the client changing their mind. We set a start default where they had to sketch 3 quick ideas on paper before they ever touched a computer. That killed the context tax immediately. We defined done as having one headline and one visual idea, which dropped the ambiguity. Then we made a rule that any changes after the second round would cost extra, which made them feel safe. Within 2 weeks, they were calmer and doing deeper work, not because they tried harder, but because the taxes were gone. Once you start noticing these taxes in your own day, you can trace every single productivity slump back to one of them. And the best part is that once you see them, they are actually really easy to fix. Next, we're going to look at how to build a cognitive load architecture, using your environment and your routines so you can stop paying interest and start building real momentum. Cognitive load architecture map. All right, let's build a system that actually deletes your mental taxes instead of just fighting them every day. Think of your schedule like a road map. Our goal here is to tear down the toll booths, paint some clear lanes, and make the next move so obvious that your body just says, "Cool, let's go." We are going to map out 4 specific layers: environment, defaults, sequences, and reviews. We'll run a minimum viable momentum spine through all of it, so your dopamine levels ramp up naturally, even when your life feels like a total mess. Layer 1 is your environment. Before you even look at your tools or your tasks, you have to shape the space around you. The thing most people totally miss is that your environment is constantly making micro decisions for you. If your desk is covered in 10 open tabs, a buzzing phone, and random notes from yesterday, you are already paying a massive context tax. You need fewer gates in your way. Put only what you need for today's specific work block within arm's reach, and put everything else behind a closed door, whether that's a physical door or a digital one. I recommend a one-screen mode for your deep work blocks, which means one window, one app, and one file. If you catch yourself thinking, "I might need that later," just park it in a staging folder and keep moving. You want to add friction to your bad choices by putting your phone in another room or using site blockers, while making the good choices feel like a total glide. One gesture should take you to your draft with your notes already pinned and your cursor waiting on the first line. This keeps your nervous system calm because you aren't asking yourself, "Should I?" every 10 seconds. Layer 2 is all about defaults. Think of defaults as your autopilot to keep you out of productivity debt. You make the decision once, and then you get to reap the benefits every single day. You should have a breakfast default, an outfit lane, a morning start default, and even a specific tool you use for every job. Here is the shortcut that nobody ever really teaches. You need to pair every single default with a specific trigger. When you sit down, you open your daily note, and when you open that note, you immediately write 3 lines. There is no debate and no second guessing. These defaults cut down on the extra load on your brain and stabilize your focus because the ramp into action is predictable. If you start feeling bored, that's actually great, but you have to earn your variety on Fridays. Back in the early 2020s, researchers looking at brain waves found that clutter and loose starts actually hurt your focus. So these defaults help you rebuild a brain-friendly start without burning up all your willpower. Layer 3 involves sequences. You want to think in terms of single-path workflows where you start in one spot, move to the next, and finish at the end with 0 forks in the road while you're working. Save the decision-making forks for your planning time, not your doing time. For every task you do more than once, write a simple guide you can read at a glance. Keep it between 5 and 9 steps, use a verb and a noun for each one, and keep it simple. I like to add error scripts at the bottom, which are just simple A, B, and C paths for when you get stuck. If you don't have the data you need, you just write a placeholder in brackets, move on, and log a task to go find it later. That tiny script kills the moments of confusion that usually make you want to switch tasks. We'll also use that MVM spine here, meaning every sequence starts with a 90-second trailhead you can do even on your worst day. Just opening the doc and writing the title is a win. Minimum viable momentum means you always have a tiny victory ready to tip your brain into a productive state. Layer 4 is your reviews. This is how you stop your work from creeping into your life and pay down the principal on your mental debt. Once a week, you should run a short audit to see where things like ambiguity or safety taxes hit you the hardest. Rate them on a scale of 1 to 5 across your different projects. When you find a spot that's causing a lot of friction, you either kill that option entirely or you turn it into a solid rule. Kill or codify is the only way you stop the interest from compounding on your stress. You either close those open loops or you write them into a sequence. You should also track how you felt during your work blocks, not just how many hours you sat there. Just make a simple note about whether the block felt steady or spiky. Over a few weeks, you'll start to see fewer dips, and that steady feeling is exactly what you're looking for. Your body doesn't lie about how much stress it's carrying. The big principle that ties this all together is having fewer gates, cleaner lanes, and one obvious next step. Anywhere you feel a sense of drag in your day, look for a gate, which might be a password, a choice you have to make, or a missing template. You need to either remove that gate or move it to your planning night. Clean lanes mean you have one tool per block, your notifications are off, and you know exactly what is going in and what is coming out. Your trailhead should live at the very top of every document with "Start here" written in bold. This is just basic cognitive load theory in action, where you kill the extra noise so your brain can use its full bandwidth on the work that actually matters. I want to show you exactly how to wire this momentum into every layer of your life. For your environment, you can end each day by setting up a one-screen mode for tomorrow's first block of work. Have the doc open with the cursor blinking and your notes pinned so you're ready to go. For your defaults, just pick one breakfast and one outfit for the work week and commit to your first action, like opening your notes at 8:30 to write 3 lines. For your sequences, build a 15-minute trailhead for your 2 most important workflows, whether that's writing and research or design and review. Each one should have 3 tiny steps that are easy to do even when your energy is low. Finally, for your reviews, run a 10-minute audit on Sunday to score your taxes and pick one new default to set up for the coming week. You also need some anti-collapse rails to act as your safety harness. You should put a lot of friction on your bad choices, like using blockers for internet rabbit holes or putting "Are you sure?" prompts on your social media apps during work hours. At the same time, make the good choices feel like a total glide by using one-gesture shortcuts and templates that are bound to your hotkeys. This matters because your nervous system loves having obvious lanes to follow. When there are fewer surprises and fewer spikes in your stress hormones, your body naturally releases more drive to get things done. I'll give you a quick story about a founder I know who used to open 5 different tools every morning just to get started. He would check Slack, Notion, Gmail, his analytics, and his calendar all at once. We moved all that admin stuff to a specific block at 10:45 and built a dedicated morning lane for him instead. Now, his laptop opens directly to his daily note, he writes his 3 lines, and his first trailhead begins immediately. His environment is clean, his defaults are set, and his weekly review keeps new tools from cluttering things up. 2 weeks later, he wasn't suddenly more disciplined, but he was definitely less taxed. He was working the same hours, but getting way more done with a much calmer nervous system. Once you get this architecture right, everything else just starts to click into place. You aren't actually pushing yourself harder, you're just paying down your mental debt and raising the limit on how much effort you can put in. Next, we are going to install this in phases so you don't feel overwhelmed by the changes. Phase 1, Autonomy Reset, I choose to because. This first phase is all about taking the brakes off by focusing on your sense of choice. When your brain feels like it's being forced to do something, it marks that task as unsafe and starts to resist. But when a task feels like something you actually chose, the pressure drops and your energy is finally released. We're going to start by changing the very words you use to describe your day. The language shift is the first step. You need to replace the phrase, I have to, with I choose to because, and you should do this out loud and in your writing. It might sound like a small thing, but it completely resets how you view your work. Saying, I have to send this proposal, feels like a threat to your time, but saying, I choose to send this proposal because it opens up 3 new deals feels like a power move. Your body stops fighting you when you frame it that way. Make sure you don't skip the because part, since that is your anchor. It reminds your whole system why spending this energy is actually worth it, which helps your dopamine levels stay steady as you get started. Next, we need to talk about choice bundling. Most people try to commit to way too many things at once and then they end up drowning. Instead of trying to buy the whole house, just focus on paying down the principal. Pick 3 high-impact choices, like your first task of the day, your outreach time, and your workout slot, and decide on those once for the entire week. Everything else can stay flexible within your guardrails. This kills the stress that comes from trying to simulate too many different futures at the same time. It gives your stress response fewer reasons to stay active. You also need some boundary scripts. These are simple sentences you can say without even thinking about them because ambiguity is what causes your stress to spike. Use a no-by-default approach with very clear criteria. You can say something like, thanks for asking, but I only say yes when there's a clear agenda and a 30-minute cap, so if that's the case, I'm in for next week. If someone asks for a favor, you can just say, I'm a no right now because I've capped my commitments for the month, but ping me next quarter if it's still relevant. You aren't being rude, you're just removing open loops that drain your energy. Your nervous system hears that you have rules in place and feels safe enough to release the energy you need. Let me show you how to use minimum viable momentum here with a simple 3-sentence daily plan. You should write this the night before on a single screen or even a small card. The first sentence is I choose to, because, followed by your big why for the day. The second sentence is if I do only one thing, it's X, where X is a very specific result. The third sentence is your trailhead, like at 8:30, I'll open the doc, paste the template, and write the title. Those 3 sentences remove about 60 tiny decisions you would normally have to face tomorrow morning. You won't have to wonder where to start or why you're even doing it because the path is already marked and your lane is clear. Here's a quick example of this in action. I knew a marketer whose mornings were total chaos between planning the week, Slack pings, and trying to hit the gym. We rewrote her plan to say, I choose to finish the launch page because it unlocks our ad tests on Friday. Her one thing was to write the hero text and the call to action, and her trailhead was just opening the file and writing 3 bad headlines at 8:30. By the 3rd day, she texted me saying she felt weirdly calm. That is what autonomy feels like. When you choose the lane yourself, your body finally lets go of the brakes. Now, let's look at the pitfalls, and the biggest one is definitely overcommitting. People hear about autonomy, and they try to take control of every single thing at once. Don't try to stack 10 different I choose to lines in one day because you'll just trigger that same safety tax. Limit yourself to 1 primary choice per day and maybe 3 pre-commits per week. The second pitfall is using vague times like, sometime today, which just creates a loop of anticipation in your head. Give your trailhead a specific time on the clock, like 8:30 or right after your coffee at 9:00. Your system likes having those time boxes so it can actually relax until it's time to work. The tricky part is learning how to say no to your future self. Choice bundling means that the current you has to protect the future you by not creating new hurdles in the middle of the week. Use a parking lot for your ideas. When a shiny new task pops up on Wednesday, just capture it in a next week list instead of adding it to today's plan. You can even use a boundary script for yourself by saying, that's parked, and I'll decide on it Sunday. This one rule stops the randomness of the week from piling up and stressing you out. Here is a shortcut that most people don't know. Make your I choose to statement visible to other people. You can post it in your team's Slack channel every morning as a single line. When you tell people you're shipping a flow to unblock the support team, your whole world starts to align around your lane. You get fewer pings, and people have clearer expectations of what you're doing. This kind of support makes your nervous system feel safe, which keeps your drive fully funded. I want you to try this right now to see how it feels. Grab a sticky note and write down, I choose to deliverable because benefit to someone. If I do only one thing, it's done. Trailhead at time, 3 tiny actions. Put that note right where you'll see it when you start work, and put your phone in another room for the first 25 minutes. Then, just do the trailhead. If you're feeling tired, just do the very first tiny action. You'll feel that click where once you're moving, the whole process feels a lot easier. That is the dopamine ramp you've been looking for. You also need a solid stop rule. Tell yourself, I stop at 5:30 after I write down my next steps. Without a clear endpoint, your brain worries that the work will never end, which keeps your stress levels high. A safe stop leads to a better evening and a steadier start the next day. You are essentially building trust with your own body. When you promise you're going to stop, you actually have to stop. If you do that, you'll find that you have more energy when you start the next morning. People always ask me what happens on days when everything goes wrong. This autonomy reset isn't about being rigid, it's about having a policy. If a real emergency hits, just take 60 seconds to rewrite your 3 sentences. You can choose to handle the outage because it protects your customers, and your one thing can be restoring service to a specific area. You still claim the lane, which keeps you from getting pulled into 10 different partial tasks that never actually get finished. I'll leave you with one more story. I worked with a developer who felt totally trapped by a mountain of must-fix tickets. We started adding one line to the top of every ticket that said, I choose to fix this because it cuts out 20 support emails. His entire mood shifted. He stopped mindlessly scrolling through error logs and actually started clearing the issues in order. The bugs were the same, but the drag was gone. That is the power of framing your work as something you chose rather than something that was forced on you. If you don't remember anything else, just remember to start your sentences with, I choose to because. It isn't just fluffy talk. It's how you tell your biology that you are safe and that what you're doing actually matters. If you pair that with choice bundling and a simple 3-sentence plan, you will feel the entire floor of your day rise up to support you. Once your choices are clear, everything else gets easier, which is why we're going to build those single-path workflows next so you never have to wonder what to do. Phase 2, Competence Scaffold, Single-Path Workflows. All right, let's talk about getting your skills on track. We already used autonomy to pick a lane, but now we need to straighten that lane out so you stop wobbling all over the place. The goal here is actually pretty simple. When you have one clear path to follow, your brain stops second-guessing every move and just starts doing the work. That is what real competence feels like. It's that, oh, I know exactly what comes next sensation. And it is the fastest way to slide into a flow state without needing to hype yourself up. You should start this process by creating one-path SOPs. I'm not talking about those boring corporate manuals nobody reads, but rather tiny checklists you'll actually use. Each SOP should cover just one job with 5 to 9 steps using only simple verbs and nouns. You have to make sure there are no forks in the road while you're actually executing the task. Save the decision-making for your planning sessions. Instead of a vague goal like work on article, your list should look like this. 1. Open the draft file. 2. Paste your outline. 3. Fill in the 3 main headings. 4. Write a rough intro. 5. Drop in placeholders for data. 6. Save the version. And 7. Log what's missing. Notice how there isn't a single or in that entire list. If you run into a gap in your research, you just put a bracket there and keep moving so you don't fall into a rabbit hole that ruins your focus. Next, we need to talk about task atoms. You have to define what done looks like in sensory terms so your nervous system can check the box without having a debate. A draft is done when you can see 800 words and 3 headings on the screen, or a design is finished once there is 1 headline and 3 specific color swatches. Most people fail here because they don't realize that competence is a feeling built on finishes you can actually see or count. If your definition of done only lives inside your head, then ambiguity starts to creep back in and you'll eventually stall out. You also need to stick to a tool minimum. Use only one tool for each job during a specific block of time. If you are writing, you stay in your text editor without opening the web or checking Slack. And if you are designing, you stay in Figma without looking at your email. Every time you hop between different tools, you are making a micro-choice that causes a dip in your dopamine. You want to keep your lane pure so your brain power stays on the actual work instead of the software around it. If you really need to use something else, just batch that task into a separate block with its own checklist. Error scripts are the secret to turning beginners into pros. You are going to get stuck at some point, and that is totally normal, but what kills your momentum is not having a pre-planned move ready to go. You should add an ABC section to the bottom of every SOP to handle these moments. For example, if you are missing info, you just insert a bracket and move on, or if you hate what you're writing, you force yourself to write the worst version possible for 60 seconds. If you are still stuck after that, stand up and take 2 slow breaths before switching to the next tiny step. These scripts take the deciding out of the equation. Your body learns that there is always a next move, which keeps your stress levels low and your focus sharp. I want to show you how to build a 15-minute trailhead that kicks you into gear. Pick whatever task pays your bills, whether it's coding or design, and create a template doc with the first 3 steps bolded at the very top. When your work block starts, you don't stop to think. You just open that doc and do those 3 things immediately. The goal here isn't to produce high quality right away, but simply to get into motion. After 15 minutes, you'll either be in the zone or you'll have made real progress you can see. This minimum viable momentum is the spine of the whole system because it makes starting feel winnable. I remember a project manager who was constantly drowning because writing a spec felt like it required 100 different choices. We fixed this by turning it into a single path where they just duplicated a template and filled in the goal and problem with 1 line each. They listed 3 user stories, pasted 1 screenshot, and tagged missing data as open before sending it off for review. A first pass that used to take all day was suddenly done in 20 minutes. They stopped researching for hours and started shipping drafts their team could actually react to. And their competence grew because the finished tasks started stacking up. You might be worried that this will kill your creativity, but you can actually put that freedom where it belongs in the ideation phase. During the execution phase, the lane stays narrow on purpose. You can still make creative calls, but you aren't trying to figure out the process while you're doing the work. That split is what keeps your brain from toggling back and forth every 3 minutes. Another important piece is to root information rather than just following a vibe. Your SOPs should specify exactly where your notes live and where the final file goes. Writing down 1 sentence that says, "Input is in the research folder," stops that frantic 10-minute hunt for a file that kills your mood. If you don't have a stable home for your work yet, make one today with simple folders for inputs and outputs. Using boring file names with the date is a huge win for your productivity. Time boxes are also a big deal. You should attach a default time limit to every task, like 45 minutes for a draft or 20 minutes for outreach. When that timer ends, you either stop or hit a checkpoint. Endlessness is just an invitation for perfectionism to take over and ruin your day. A clear stop time tells your brain the runway is short, so it spends its energy now instead of hoarding it for later. Plus, if you finish early, you get to bank a tiny win that fuels your next session. There are a few common mistakes to watch out for here. First, don't collect a bunch of templates without actually using them, because hoarding SOPs just recreates the confusion you're trying to avoid. Second, don't write novels. If your checklist is too long to scan, it won't help you. Finally, never mix your planning and your doing. Deciding on a story arc is a planning task, so it shouldn't sneak into your writing checklist. Now it's your turn to try this out. Choose one recurring task that always drains you and spend 10 minutes writing a 1-path SOP for it. Define done in sensory terms, add your error scripts, and put that 15-minute trailhead at the top. Tomorrow, run just that trailhead with everything else closed and feel how it clicks. Once you have one clean lane working, you can clone that pattern for your other workflows next week. The reason this works is all down to the biology we've been discussing. Single paths erase those tiny micro-choices, which frees up space in your brain and keeps you engaged. Having a sensory definition of done makes you feel more capable, and error scripts keep you calm by proving there is always a safe way forward. When you stack these things together, the work stops feeling heavy and starts feeling doable. Phase 3, safety container, threat-proof your day. Now we are going to lock in the floor so your system stops being on guard and starts giving you energy. Safety isn't just a feeling, it's a set of rules your body can actually trust. When your brain knows the boundaries, like when you win and when you stop, it stops looking for threats. This means less stress and more drive for the things that matter. We are building a container that makes problems unlikely and makes recovery fast. You need to start with 3 clear rules. First, define what a win looks like for the day and make sure it's something you actually control. You win today if you deliver one specific thing, which kills that "did I do enough?" loop that keeps you awake at night. Second, set a hard stop rule. Write down that you stop at 5:30 after you've parked your next steps and closed your laptop. Without this rule, your body assumes the work is going to follow you home. Third, decide when to say no. Create a simple checklist for what earns a yes, like having a clear agenda and a time cap. Making the decision before the request even shows up removes the threat entirely. Pre-decisions are your next set of guardrails for things like money, meetings, and messages. For money, you might decide that any purchase over $100 has to wait 24 hours. For meetings, you could decide to skip status updates and just read a document instead. For messages, try checking them only at 11:00 and 4:00 for 20 minutes. These tiny fences stop those micro threats from popping up and distracting you. Your nervous system loves a good rhythm, and it will stop waiting for a notification ding when it knows the window will open later. Social contracts are way more important than most people realize. You need to set expectations out loud so your brain isn't constantly guessing what other people want. Tell your team that you work in deep blocks every morning and that they should only tag you if it's an actual emergency. Tell your family that when the door is closed between 8:30 and 10:00, you shouldn't be interrupted. This is how you build support that actually reduces your stress. When the world stops throwing surprises at you, your whole system starts to downshift into a calmer state. Buffer blocks act as your pressure valves. Since uncertainty is never going to fully disappear, you have to schedule time for it. Set aside 2 25-minute buffers, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, to handle all the little things that drift into your day. The trick is to label these blocks so they don't invade your deep focus time. If a random task pops up at 9:15, you just put it in an inbox and tell yourself you'll handle it during the 11:00 buffer. Your brain can relax because it knows that task has a home and a specific time to be finished. Even with the best plan, you are still going to hit spikes of stress from a bad message or a sudden deadline. You need a floor you can hit in 2 minutes to stop the downward slide. This 2-minute reset works anytime. First, splash some cold water on your face or wrists to give your system a quick nudge. Second, take 4 slow breaths, focusing on making the exhale longer than the inhale. Third, fix your posture by standing tall and looking slightly up. Finally, get one tiny win in your lane, even if it's just renaming a file. This combo breaks the stress loop and gives you back a sense of control. Let's look at how these pieces actually snap together during a normal day. In the morning, you start with your written win rule and your stop rule already on the page. Your first deep work block happens with minimal tools, so your safety signals stay clean. When a Slack message pings you with a quick question, in the middle of the morning, you don't open it. You just write down that you'll reply during your 11:00 buffer. At 11:00, you process your messages for 20 minutes and then park the rest. If a client tries to add more work in the afternoon, you just point back to your contract. At 5:30, you do your shutdown routine and stop. Because you close the loop, your system actually recovers that night, which makes the next morning much easier. There are a few mistakes that can trip you up here. If your stop time is around 6-ish, your brain is going to hear that as infinite work time. You have to pick a specific time and honor it. Also, don't let your parking lot items sneak into your deep work blocks. Use a separate list so your focus stays small. If you do have to break a rule, just log why it happened once and move on. Finally, don't hide your expectations. If you don't tell people about your boundaries, they will assume you are always available. You might think all these rules will make you feel rigid, but it's actually the opposite. Being predictable to yourself makes you feel safe, and that safety is what allows you to take bigger risks. When the edges of your day are secure, you can try a harder draft or pitch a bolder idea because you aren't constantly guarding against surprises. I once worked with a support lead who lived in a constant state of high alert because of pings and escalations. We set up message windows and a specific policy for urgent tags, and we added a visible card to their desk that listed their 5:30 stop routine. We taught the whole team these rules in a single meeting. By the first week, the work was still getting done, but the lead's heart rate dropped and their mornings felt much lighter. They weren't being tougher on people, they were just making their environment safer. Before we move on, I want you to build your own starter container right now. Write down what counts as a win today, what time you are going to stop, and what your criteria is for saying yes to a request. Set your message times and write out that 2-minute reset plan. Put this list right where you do your planning. This is your safety net. Once the floor is in place, we can start tying everything together into a daily sequence that keeps you out of productivity debt. Phase 4, Sequences and Defaults, the anti-debt day. Now we're going to stitch everything together into a day that basically runs itself. I like to think of this as the anti-debt day because we're using sequences to remove forks in the road and setting up defaults that delete choices before they even show up. You'll still have plenty of freedom, but that freedom is going to live in the right places instead of draining your battery. When your body sees these clear lanes, it starts spending energy on the work instead of constantly guarding it. We start with morning triage, but you aren't actually planning your day here. Instead, you're just running a 3-line check that you wrote down the night before. It looks like this. I choose to do this because if I only do one thing today, it's X my trailhead starts at time with these 3 tiny actions. You read that once, and that's your triage done. Then you jump straight into one frictionless gesture, like opening your notes, pasting a template, and writing the title. You aren't checking status tools, digging through your inbox, or doing any calendar archaeology. This alpha-friendly start keeps your nervous system quiet because there's nothing to evaluate yet. The ramp is short, that first win is tiny, and your dopamine finally has a chance to catch. If a random task pops into your head, just drop it into a parking lot list and tell yourself you'll handle the buffer at 11:00. We are keeping this lane completely pure. Work blocks come next, and I have one rule here that is going to save you hours of frustration. You get 1 input, 1 output, and 1 escape hatch. If you're in a writing block, your input is your notes folder, your output is the draft, and your escape hatch is that ABC script sitting at the bottom of the page. You don't get to open analytics in the middle of a draft because that belongs to a totally different block with its own set of rules. It's the same for coding where your input is the tickets and your output is the commits. If you get stuck, your escape hatch is to write a failing test, commit your work in progress, stand up to breathe, and then resume. This single-lane design stops those dopamine dips that happen when you switch tasks and wreck your momentum. Since you aren't making process choices while you're actually working, your brain stays focused on the task instead of wondering how to do it. Zero-choice zones are going to be your new secret weapon for staying productive. You need to install defaults in areas where making a choice doesn't actually add any real value to your life. For breakfast, just pick one weekday meal and stick to it. And for your outfit, try sticking to 1 lane or maybe just 2 colors. Your first task should always be that pre-decided trailhead you picked out earlier. These little defaults reduce the context tax right when you're at your most fragile in the morning. You aren't being boring just for the sake of it. You're actually preserving your mental bandwidth for the stuff that actually pays the bills. Later on, you can earn some variety windows like a fun Friday lunch or playing around with your Sunday outfit once momentum becomes a habit. Until then, let the defaults handle the boring stuff so your brain stops burning fuel on things that don't matter. The afternoon slump protocol is the real hinge that holds your entire day together. Somewhere around 2:00 or 3:00 in the afternoon, your system is naturally going to take a dip. Most people start chasing novelty here and end up blowing up their baseline, but I want you to do something different. Run that 2-minute dopamine drain reset we talked about with some cold water and slow exhales. After that, stack a tiny, winnable action tied to your very next block, like renaming a file or writing just 1 sentence. The reason this works so well is that you're giving your body physical proof of progress right at the moment it wants to bail on you. That stabilizes your dopamine ramp and stops the switch spiral before it starts. If you really need a pickup, add some light movement like 10 squats or a quick lap around the hallway before sitting back down to run your trailhead. No tabs and no messages allowed. You are officially back in the zone. The shutdown stack is how we close the book so your recovery can actually do its job. This should take you 10 minutes at the most. First, you capture by dumping any loose tasks into your trusted inbox so they aren't floating in your head. Then you prune by killing anything that doesn't pass the "must I do this week" test. After that, you park the few things that actually matter on your calendar and drop the rest into a list for next week. Finally, you prime tomorrow by writing your 3-line plan and setting up one-screen mode for your morning block. This means your dock is open, the cursor is blinking, and your notes are pinned and ready to go. When you shut the lid at the same time every day, your brain learns that the day is over and your energy can rebound overnight. That is how you buy yourself a much smoother start without needing to find motivation. Let me show you exactly how a full anti-debt day flows from start to finish. At 8:30, you read your 3 lines and run that first trailhead to get moving. From 9:00 to 10:30, you're in a deep block with 1 input, 1 output, and your escape hatch ready to go. At 10:30, you take a quick stretch, and then from 10:45 to 11:10, you hit your buffer for messages and admin. That buffer is strictly time-capped so it doesn't bleed into your 11:15 deep block, which follows that same single-lane design. Lunch is a total default so you don't burn any decisions, and 1:30 is for light admin or collaborating with others. At 2:55, you run that 2-minute reset, and from 3:00 to 4:20, you hit your third block. You finish up with a second buffer window at 4:30 and run your shutdown stack at 5:15. By 5:30, you hit your stop rule and you're done. You didn't actually work more hours, but you worked with way fewer gates and much cleaner lanes. There are a few pitfalls you need to watch out for while you're doing this. Adding variety too soon is the classic mistake people make. They start feeling better after 3 days and immediately try to customize the system. You need to keep these defaults for 2 full weeks before you change a single thing. Remember, you are training for safety and competence, not just chasing the next shiny thing. Another big pitfall is letting your buffers bleed into your deep work blocks. You have to protect those windows like they are a high-stakes meeting with your future self. The third big one is letting exceptions multiply until the rules don't matter anymore. If you break a rule, just log it once and reset immediately because we want a solid policy here, not just vibes. I want to share a quick story about a researcher whose afternoons used to be a total graveyard of YouTube loops and snacks. We built the slump protocol directly into their calendar with a 2:58 reset and a 3:00 tiny win. At 3:03, they started their trailhead for a specific file they needed to analyze. We also defaulted their snack and a 5-minute walk at 2:40 so that blood sugar swings wouldn't drive them to switch tasks. 2 weeks later, they weren't perfect, but those 3:00 p.m. blocks went from 0 output to 2 steady sessions every single week. They didn't do it through sheer willpower either. They did it by building lanes. Now it's your turn to try this out. Tonight, I want you to write down tomorrow's 3-line plan. When you wake up, skip the inbox and run your trailhead first thing. For your very first block, lock in 1 input, 1 output, and 1 escape hatch. Eat your default breakfast without thinking about it. At 2:58, run that reset and take a tiny win to keep the momentum going. At 5:15, run your shutdown stack and stage your screen for tomorrow morning. This is your anti-debt day starter kit, and it might feel almost too simple at first. That's actually a good thing because simple is what your biology actually trusts. Once this runs for a week, we can tighten it up with audits, but this is the spine that pays down your decision debt while you work. Weekly debt audit and pruning ritual. It is time to make this entire system self-healing. A short weekly audit is how you pay down the principal on your debt and keep your nervous system from sliding back into guard mode. This process is simple and fast, and it teaches your brain that we actually close loops around here. You should run this once a week at the same time, whether that's Sunday night or Friday afternoon. It only takes about 15 to 20 minutes, and we're going to score your taxes and catch any inventory creep. Let's walk through how to do it. Start by doing a quick scan of your calendar and your actual work logs from the past week. I don't want to see what you plan to do, I want to see what you actually did. Pull up your 3 biggest blocks and your 2 messiest ones, and score the 3 taxes for each on a scale of 1 to 5. First is the ambiguity tax. Did you actually know what done looked like, and did you have a single path to get there? If you had to stop and ask, what's next? A bunch of times, that's a 4 or a 5. If you ran clean all the way to a concrete finish, that's a 1 or a 2. Next, look at the context tax. Did you spend the hour hopping between different tools and tasks? Were your notifications actually off, or did you break the 1 input, 1 output rule? Try to count your obvious switches, because anything more than 3 per hour is way too high. 1 or 2 switches is actually a pretty good spot to be in. Finally, check the safety tax. Did you hesitate to start because your expectations were fuzzy or the task felt endless? Did you blow past your stop rule and carry that worry into your evening? If the answer is yes, then your safety tax is high and we need to fix it. Now you have to either kill the problem or codify it. For any hotspot you found, you either remove the option entirely or you write a new rule for it. For example, if you kept bouncing between 2 different note apps, you need to kill one of them. Archive the old one, export your files, and delete the shortcut so it's gone for good. That is how you pay off your principal. Or, if you kept getting derailed by quick messages on Slack, you need to codify that. Set a rule that you only check messages at 11, 0, 0, and 4, 0, 0 with a 20-minute cap. Tell your team that the urgent tag is only for actual outages. Once you paste that into your team channel, the decision is made and the loop is closed. You need to do the exact same thing with your tasks because maybe projects will eat your nervous system alive. Open up your list of maybes for next week and pick 2 of them. You either commit to a specific date for them or you park them in a quarterly review list. If a project doesn't earn a date on the calendar, you archive it. You aren't being mean or harsh here, you're just protecting your recovery time. Pending choices keep your brain in a state of high vigilance, so you need to either close them or calendar them. Now we need to detect any inventory creep that happened over the week. Creep is just a fancy word for new inboxes, tools, or folders where information can hide from you. Scan your phone's home screen, your browser bookmarks, and even your downloads folder. If you find a new inbox, collapse it into the one you already trust. If you find a new tool that does the same job as an old one, either uninstall it or give it one very specific purpose. You should only have 1 tool per job. Write that down in your defaults doc. Writing is for Obsidian, tasks are for things, and design is for Figma. Having clear owners for every job is what shuts down that context tax for good. I want you to measure your retention like a scientist rather than a judge. You don't need any fancy hardware for this, just keep a simple note at the end of each deep block. Was it steady or was it spiky? Write 1 sentence like, 90 minutes steady, 1 wobble at the 45-minute mark, but I recovered with a breath. Over the next few weeks, you're looking for fewer spikes and much faster recoveries. That feeling of alpha-like steadiness is the physical proof that the system is actually working. If a specific block stays spiky week after week, go back and drill those taxes again. Usually, there is an unclosed loop or a tool hop hiding somewhere in the shadows. The reward reset is where you teach your dopamine to love the start of a task instead of just the finish line. Most people only reward themselves for the big finish, which just pushes the brain to chase novelty and delay the actual effort. Instead, I want you to anchor a tiny reward to your trailhead. After you run those first 90 seconds of work, take a sip of the good coffee or check a tiny box on a visible board. You could even play 10 seconds of a favorite song. Keep it small, immediate, and predictable. Then, save your bigger rewards for the total number of blocks you completed this week, not for being perfect. You are conditioning the ramp, not the result. The tricky part of this whole thing is being honest with yourself. Please don't turn this audit into a way to blame yourself for a bad week. You aren't grading your worth as a human, you're just tuning the lanes. If you see a pattern where your afternoon blocks are always spiky, then adjust the architecture of your day. Move your admin work earlier, add a default snack, or actually enforce that 2-minute reset. If a surprise meeting nuked your entire day, codify a new rule that says no meetings between 9:00 and 12:00. If you broke a rule, just log the exception once, like broke my message window to fix a launch bug, and then reset. There is no need for drama here. Try doing a 20-minute run of this right now. Put a timer on and pull up your calendar and your last 3 blocks. Score your taxes, kill or codify 2 of your biggest leaks, and collapse 1 inbox or tool that's been cluttering things up. Skim through your retention notes and circle 1 specific block you want to fix for next week. Finally, write down 1 reward you're going to give yourself after you hit tomorrow's first trailhead. And just like that, you're done. I remember a team lead who felt totally cooked because they had everything everywhere. In their very first audit, they realized they had 5 different inboxes: Slack, 2 emails, Jira, and a personal notes app. Their context tax was through the roof. They killed one of the emails, routed all their Jira mentions to a single daily board, and told their team that DMs were for emergencies only. They also rewired their rewards so they got a tiny treat after the first 90 seconds of work instead of waiting until the inbox was clear. By week 2, they were having steadier mornings and way fewer crashes in the afternoon. It was the same job, but with fewer gates in the way. Finally, you should write out a 1-page audit template so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every week. Give it a title like Weekly Debt Audit and include sections for your scores, what you're killing or codifying, and your focus for next week. Keep the whole thing scannable. On Sunday, you just open it up, fill it out, and close it. That is all there is to it. Just remember that these reviews aren't meant to be homework. They are just basic maintenance. 15 minutes once a week is what keeps your taxes low and your defaults fresh. When your body finally trusts that the system is safe, it's going to release way more drive. That is the whole game we're playing here. Multipliers, anti-switch design. Now we're going to layer in the fun stuff, which are the little multipliers that make your whole day feel smooth without you having to put in extra effort. You can think of these as anti-switch design moves because each one is meant to shrink those tiny micro-choices, protect your dopamine, and keep your mental lane totally clear. If you stack just a few of these together, you're going to feel things click into place pretty fast. The first trick is to batch your work by sensation rather than just by topic. Most people try to batch by category, like doing all their emails and then all their documents, but it's actually much better to batch by how your body is moving. You want to keep the same motor patterns and tiny gestures going for as long as possible. If you're doing something that requires dense typing, you should keep all your writing, outlining, and documenting tasks in one big chunk. When you're in a scanning and clicking mood, that's the time to do your research, sort through files, and clean up your inbox all at once. This works because your brain actually primes your muscles for specific paths, like how your fingers move or where your eyes look, and switching those physical patterns costs way more energy than you'd think. When you keep the physical sensation constant, you can just ride one groove and avoid that mid-afternoon energy dip. Next, you want to route your work based on your internal state. Your energy isn't just a flat line throughout the day, so you should map out your personal curve for a week to see when you feel sharp, when you feel social, and when you feel totally foggy. Once you know your rhythm, you can place your work exactly where it fits best. You should put your high-focus brain work in your peak morning lane, save collaborative meetings for when you're feeling chatty, and push mindless admin stuff to when you're feeling flat. If your peak focus is between 9:00 and 11:00, you have to make that time sacred by banning meetings and ignoring your inbox. When your social battery is at its highest around 1:00, that's the perfect time for quick syncs, and if your brain starts to melt by 3:30, just run some light cleanup or reviews. You aren't being weak when you do this. You're just being smart about how your biology actually works. One-gesture shortcuts might seem tiny, but they are absolutely lethal for productivity in the best way possible. Every bit of friction you encounter in an app is basically a gate that slows you down, so you need to kill them off. You should bind your top 3 most used actions to a single keystroke, like a button that instantly opens your daily notes or jumps straight to your current draft. I highly recommend creating a global shortcut for quick capture so you can drop a thought into your inbox with a timestamp without even thinking about it. You can also pin your project notes so they open automatically with your workspace, and on your phone, you should move every addictive app off the first screen. By keeping a single work folder with only the apps you actually need, you reduce the number of times you have to ask yourself where something is or what you should do next. Preloaded worlds are the secret to making your starts feel effortless. Before you finish up for the night, open the exact tabs, notes, and assets your first block of work needs for the next morning. When you finally sit down to work, you're already in the room because everything is waiting for you, which means there's no hunting for files and no chance for a dopamine leak. You can do this for all your recurring workflows, like having a specific writing world with your outline and sources or a coding world with your repo and task list ready to go. It's important to keep each of these worlds pure and focused on one goal. If you need to pivot to a different project, you should switch worlds entirely instead of trying to cram new stuff into the old one. Your brain really loves that context purity, and your focus stays much higher when the scene around you stays stable. Recovery microdoses act like an on-the-go pit crew for your brain. These are tiny breaks of 90 seconds or 2 minutes that you sprinkle throughout the day before you hit a wall, not after you've already crashed. You have plenty of easy options here, like doing 4 rounds of slow exhales or just sipping some water while looking at something far away to relax your eyes. You could also stand up to roll your shoulders or step outside for a bit of bright sunlight to reset your system. I like to pair one of these physical resets with a tiny work win, like finally naming a file or sending a one-line update to a teammate. This combination gives your body proof that you're safe and making progress at the same time. Use these at natural breaks, like right after a meeting or halfway through a long session, to prevent that heavy feeling of decision debt from building up. Now, here is where most people usually mess up. They try to install all 5 of these multipliers at once and just end up making things complicated again. You shouldn't do that, and instead, you should try to install just 1 per week. During week 1, you just focus on batching by sensation, and then in week 2, you start routing your work by your energy state. By week 3, you can add your 2 favorite one-gesture shortcuts, and in week 4, you create your first preloaded world for your most important task. Finally, in week 5, you can start scheduling those 2 little microdoses for your afternoon. This slow roll works because your nervous system actually trusts gradual changes more than big overhauls. Let me show you how all of this actually snaps together during a real workday. You might start with your heavy typing work during your peak morning hours, using a preloaded world to write your first draft. Since you have your shortcuts bound and your inputs ready, you're just flowing, and then at 10:40, you take a 90-second microdose before starting your next typing task. Because you're staying in that same motor groove of typing, the transition feels easy and natural. Around 11:15, you switch your sensation to scanning mode to handle your inbox and move some files around for 25 minutes. After lunch, you route your social work into that chatty window by doing 2 short calls back to back. At 2:58, you run a quick 2-minute reset and then knock out a mechanical task like tagging notes while you're in your afternoon fog. You end the day by setting up a review world for tomorrow, and even though you worked the same hours, you had fewer switches and way more steam. I have a quick story about a product designer I know who used to bounce around all day between Figma, Slack, and Notion. We didn't change a single one of their goals, but we just stacked these multipliers on top of their routine. We set up a preloaded concept world for their morning peak and gave them a one-gesture shortcut to their main template. Then we moved all their feedback calls to a batch after lunch and added a microdose right before they did their asset cleanup in the afternoon. They messaged me later saying they didn't feel like a genius, but they just didn't feel scrambled anymore. That is exactly the point, because anti-switch design isn't about making you superhuman, it's just about letting your actual brain show up to work. There is one more nuance here, and that is protecting your transitions. You should use tiny rituals to mark the end of one task and the start of another, like closing a document and saying, "Next block" out loud. It only takes 30 seconds, but it tells your system that the context has truly changed, so you don't drag the residue of the last task into the next one. This leads to fewer ghost tabs running in the back of your head and fewer phantom pings in your body. Now it's your turn to try this out. Just pick one multiplier to start with tonight. If you want to batch by sensation, label tomorrow's tasks with letters for typing, scanning, or voice, and then group the similar ones together. If you want to route by state, block out your 2 peak hours for deep work and move one meeting out of that window. If you go with shortcuts, set up your quick capture button tonight, or if you want a preloaded world, just stage tomorrow morning's tabs before you go to bed. If you choose the microdoses, put 2 of them on your calendar right now and paste the instructions in the event notes. Just keep it small and feel that friction drop away, because that's the multiplier doing the heavy lifting for you. Common mistakes and fixes. Let's talk about how to clean up the traps that quietly build up mental debt. I'm going to give you the pattern of the mistake, the reason why it happens, and a fix you can actually run today. The first big mistake is over-optimizing your tools instead of sticking to your defaults. This one feels productive, but it actually bleeds hours of your time. You might find yourself tweaking Notion views or testing 6 different task apps, but all you're doing is adding more gates to your lane. The reason this feels so good is that the novelty hits your dopamine like candy, but then it tanks your baseline focus later on. Plus, every new feature you add creates more micro-choices, which just raises your mental tax. The fix for this is to use tool minima and set strict defaults. You should pick exactly one tool for each job and write them down in a simple doc, like using Obsidian for writing and Figma for design. Once you've picked them, delete or archive everything else so you aren't tempted. If a new tool looks cool, just ask yourself if it replaces an entire job, and if it doesn't, just pass on it. Variety is a fun experiment for Friday afternoon, but it shouldn't be part of your Monday morning. Vague goals are another trap because they spike what I call ambiguity tax. If you write down something like work on the website, your brain can't actually see what done looks like, so it pings you with anxiety all day. You end up pausing to look at your options, and your competence starts to dip. The fix is to define a sensory, done point and create a single path forward. You should write your outcome exactly like a camera could see it, such as finish 5 slides with headlines by 11:30. Then, add a simple step-by-step list at the top of your document with no more than 9 steps. If you feel the need to explore other ideas, you should schedule a separate block for that later. Your doing time should be for staying in your lane, not for staring at forks in the road. Having too many, maybe, projects is a silent killer because open loops take a toll even when you think you're ignoring them. Your brain keeps watch over these projects because it's worried they might bite you later, and that keeps your stress levels higher than they should be. You end up feeling weirdly tired from doing nothing at all. The fix here is to either close the project or put it on a calendar. You should run a 10-minute sweep of your maybe list every week and decide to either commit to a date, park it for later, or just archive it forever. Make a rule that you can't have more than 5 active projects at once. Any new ideas should go into a review list for next quarter rather than your current week. You'll feel the background noise in your head drop within days because your brain finally has fewer futures to guard. A lot of people have no escalation path for when they get stuck, so they just freeze at the first snag and switch windows. This puts you right back into that novelty spiral where your dopamine dips lower every time you click away. The fix is to write error scripts at the bottom of your task lists. These are simple A, B, and C plans for when things go wrong. Plan A might be to just put a bracket in the text and keep moving, while Plan B could be to write the worst possible version for 60 seconds just to get through it. Plan C is your final resort, where you stand up, take 2 breaths, and switch to a different micro-step. This removes the need to make a decision when you're already frustrated. Your body sees a clear next move, your system calms down, and you can keep rolling. Finally, skipping your reviews allows mental debt to compound quietly in the background. Without a weekly audit, your defaults start to decay, and your tools start to creep back in until your afternoons start hurting again. The fix is a simple 15-minute weekly debt audit where you score your focus and safety for the week. You should use this time to kill off any leaks you found or collapse a duplicate tool that's been bothering you. You aren't writing a long journal entry here. You're just turning the screws to keep the machine running. When you do this, your body learns that you're going to maintain the lane, and it rewards you by releasing more natural drive. Let me show you how to stack all these fixes in one quick run tonight. First, open your defaults doc and pick one tool per job, then move everything else into an archive folder and remove their shortcuts. Next, pick your hardest task for tomorrow and write down exactly what done looks like, along with a 7-step list and those ABC error scripts. After that, look at your maybe list and either pick a date for those items or park them for next quarter. Finally, paste a simple audit template into a note and set a recurring event for Sunday. You just cut out 3 major gates before they even had a chance to show up. I remember a founder who swore they needed flexibility, but their whole week was just 10 different half-starts. They were using Asana, Notion, Todoist, and even email flags all at the same time. We did one pass and narrowed it down to just things for tasks and drive for docs, while killing off everything else. We wrote down a sensory, done goal for their main project and parked 4 of their maybe features for the next quarter. After we scheduled that 15-minute Sunday audit, their deep work blocks went from jittery to steady in just 7 days. It was the same brain they always had, but we just removed the gates. The trickiest part of all this is going to be your cravings for novelty. That just checking feeling is real, but you have to treat it like dessert. I recommend creating a novelty window on Friday from 3:00 to 4:00, where you can try out all the new apps and templates you found during the week. Put all your shiny new ideas there, and if they still seem important on Friday, evaluate them against one rule. Does this replace a job or remove a gate? If it doesn't, you have to let it go so your Monday morning stays clean. Another fix that pays off big is moving your decisions to the night before. If you're still choosing what to eat or what to wear in the morning, you're burning through your drive when you're at your most fragile. Decide those things tonight and set your computer to one-screen mode with your document already open and the cursor blinking. You'll feel the ease of that setup within the first 5 minutes of your workday. One last thing is to protect your peak hours at all costs. If people keep trying to put meetings in your best focus window, you should share a rule that says you're unavailable from 9:00 to 11:00. You can even use a template to decline those invites by suggesting a later time for a sync. Most people are going to be flexible with you, and if they aren't, you have great data for your next weekly audit. If you don't remember anything else from this, just remember to fix your gates instead of relying on your grit. Every mistake we talked about is actually a gate problem, and every fix is just a way to move that gate out of your way. If you do that, your biology is going to start funding your effort again. Quick wins in 48 hours. Let's make this real over the next 2 days. We aren't doing a total life overhaul here, but I want to give you some moves you can actually feel by day 2. We're going to build a one-screen morning, set up 3 defaults, write 2 error scripts, and create a no-by-default meeting rule. Finally, we'll run a 20-minute debt audit to prune 2 choices. If you do them in this exact order, you'll feel the floor come up beneath you pretty fast. Tonight, your job is to build a one-screen morning. Open only the windows your first work block needs, like your main document, a notes pane, and your template. Put the cursor exactly where you need to start and close everything else on your desktop. You should set your computer to open that specific window as soon as it wakes up, and then put your phone in another room or on Do Not Disturb until 10:00 a.m. Tape a sticky note to your keyboard that says, "Open today, MD, paste, write title," because that's your trailhead cue. I want you to do this first because tomorrow's start is fragile, and if the scene is clean, your brain just slides into work without a debate. Next, you need to install 3 defaults for your breakfast, your outfit, and your first task. Pick one weekday breakfast that you don't hate, like eggs and toast or yogurt and fruit, and just stick to it. Decide on a narrow outfit lane, maybe just black tops and jeans with 1 pair of shoes so you don't have to think about it. Then you lock in your first task, which is that exact trailhead you prepped earlier. Write it out clearly. 8:30 open draft, MD, paste outline, write 2 bad lines. These defaults kill those morning gates that slow you down, and you'll save the tiny bit of willpower you've been burning before 9:00 a.m. Now it's time to write 2 error scripts, 1 for research and 1 for writing. Keep these dead simple and put them at the bottom of each template you use. For research, if a source is missing, just tag it as fetch and move on, or if you feel lost, write the one question you're trying to answer in a single line. If you're still stuck after 90 seconds, park it on a fetch list. Stand up to take 2 slow exhales, and then resume. For writing, if that blank page fear hits, just write the worst intro possible for 60 seconds. If a fact feels fuzzy, bracket it with check and keep going, and if you stall twice, just write the next subhead and come back later. These scripts remove the need to make a decision about what to do when things go wrong, which helps you stay in your lane. Create one no-by-default meeting rule and write the sentence you'll paste on autopilot. You can use something like, "I'm a no to meetings that don't have an agenda, a decision owner, and a 30-minute cap, but I'm happy to weigh in a sync if that helps." Put that in a text expander or a snippet tool so it's ready to go. If you need a softer tone, try saying, "To keep deep work blocks clean, I'm a no unless there's an agenda and a decision owner, but if not, send a doc and I'll comment by 4:00 p.m. By doing this, you've just deleted a whole category of surprise asks that usually ruin your flow. Now we do the 20-minute debt audit and prune. Set a timer and pull up this week's calendar along with your actual work. First, list the 2 most chaotic moments you had, and then name the tasks for each one, whether it was ambiguity, context switching, or safety. Step 3 is to kill or codify 2 choices right now, which might mean uninstalling a duplicate tool or archiving a stale project that's been sitting there. You can codify things by deciding to check messages only at 11, 0, 0, and 4, 0, 0, or by sticking to 1 tool per job. Finally, spot any inventory creep, like a new inbox you didn't need, and collapse it into your main system before writing tomorrow's 3-line plan. Let me show you exactly how to run these 48 hours. On day 0, take 20 minutes at night to stage 1 screen mode, pick your breakfast and outfit, and lock your first task. Paste those 2 error scripts, save your meeting reply snippet, and run that quick audit to prune 2 things. On the morning of day 1, read your 3 lines, skip the inbox, and run the trailhead while eating your default breakfast. When you start to wobble, use the error script, and then at 10:45 you can buffer your messages for 20 minutes. In the afternoon at 2:58, run the 2-minute reset to take a tiny win and start your second block. At 5:15, use your shutdown stack to capture, prune, park, and restage tomorrow's 1 screen, then just repeat it for day 2. You'll notice how the first 5 minutes feel way easier, and that mid-afternoon dip isn't nearly as dramatic. I have a quick story about a freelancer who tried this exact pack. They defaulted to oatmeal and a black tea, staged a single doc, wrote their error scripts, and set that meeting rule. During the audit, they killed a second notes app and muted a Slack channel that was distracting them. On day 1, they actually shipped a rough draft before noon for the first time in weeks. By day 2, their 3:00 p.m. block didn't die because they used the reset, wrote a title, and finished the second section. Their words were, "It felt boring and weirdly calm." And honestly, that's exactly the point. There are some common snags you'll hit in these 48 hours. You're going to want to peek at your inbox just to see, but you have to park that until 10:45. You'll also want to tweak your defaults, but I want you to run them for 2 days before you judge them. You might forget the error scripts in the heat of the moment, so put them at the very top of your document in bold for now. When you get a quick chat, ping, just paste the meeting rule. If it really is an emergency, they'll tell you, but otherwise, your lane stays totally intact. Now it's your turn to try. Tonight, do the 20-minute setup, and tomorrow, just trust the lane you built. If you feel that click, a smoother start or less of a wobble at 3:00, then lock it in for a full week. After that, we'll stretch this into a 2-week run where this kind of steadiness becomes your new normal. What if 2 weeks from now? Close your eyes for a second and try to picture your day 14 mornings from now. You open your laptop and your first block is already staged and waiting for you. There is no hunting for files, no extra tabs open, and absolutely no debate about what to do. You read your 3 lines, run the trailhead, and the work just starts. The feeling is flat in a really good way, sort of like a quiet runway before takeoff. That's what I mean by an alpha-stable morning, and it isn't about hype, it's just clean focus without those head noise spikes. By mid-morning, you've already finished 1 concrete deliverable. Done actually looks like something you can point to, whether it's a slide deck drafted, a first pass on a spec, or code that's been merged. You log 1 line in your retention note that says, "Steady with 1 wobble at 40, and then you just move on. Your messages are waiting for the buffer window, and you don't feel tugged toward them because your rule is holding strong. You can actually feel the difference in your body, because there's less guarding and more give. Now we get to the fun part. Your deep sessions actually go deep. After 2 weeks of these 1 input and 1 output blocks, you'll hit a rhythm where you can knock out 3 or 4 focus chunks in a single day. This doesn't happen because you forced it, but because your dopamine levels aren't getting cut off by constant task switching. You sit down for your second block, and it clicks into place faster than before. You actually start trusting your own starts, and that is a weirdly nice feeling to have. Your afternoons are going to stop being a graveyard for productivity. Around 2:58, you run that 2-minute reset on autopilot. The cold water, the breath, the posture, and the tiny win, and your 3:00 p.m. block actually lifts. It might not happen every single day, but it happens often enough to matter. You get a small window of flow instead of a window of doom scrolling. That tiny change starts to compound, and you end more days with a finished thing instead of a swamp of partial projects. These confidence loops start to sneak in. Since you have fewer forks in the road and a clearer definition of done, you start stacking up your finishes. Every time you finish something, it whispers, "See? You can do this." and your sense of competence starts to rise. That rise fuels your autonomy, and you start choosing bolder work because you aren't scared of things feeling endless. 2 weeks in, saying no gets a lot easier because your rules have actual receipts to back them up. People stop expecting instant replies because you've kindly trained them to respect your lanes. Your identity starts to shift during this time too. Routine stops feeling like a punishment and just becomes who you are as a person. You'll catch yourself saying, "I start with my trailhead," like it's just the natural way you work. That's self-determination theory in action, where your autonomy and competence are satisfied and your relationships are supported by clear expectations. Adherence just follows naturally after that. You don't need a bunch of pep talks anymore. You just need your checklist and your window of time. And yeah, I know there will still be messy days. Things like travel, kids, or a big launch will happen. The big difference now is that you have rails to keep you on track. You can rewrite those 3 lines in 60 seconds and you still own the day. You run the reset and you still save the back half of your afternoon. Even if you break a rule, you just log it once and reset. Decision debt doesn't pile up anymore because it gets serviced as you go. If that version of your life sounds good, then lock in what worked in week 1 for just 1 more week. Then, in week 3, we're going to add the antifragile layer, which is all about how to make your system even stronger under stress. That's what we'll cover in the next video. Look, you aren't actually lazy or low on discipline, but you are definitely drowning in decision debt. Once you clear that debt out of your life, your natural drive just comes right back. Try setting up those 3 defaults, write your 2 error scripts, and run a quick audit this weekend to see how much easier your afternoons feel. If you want that antifragile upgrade, check out the next video and subscribe so you